July 27th, 2002, a hot and humid morning, typical of the rainy season in Manaus, capital of the state of Amazonas. The couple Roberto Cardoso, 34 years old, and Marta Oliveira, 31 years old, said goodbye to their relatives after a 5-day visit. Both had traveled from Sao Paulo to visit Marta's aunt, Dona Conceição, who had turned 70 that week. The celebration had brought together family members from different states, and now, one by one, they all returned to their hometowns. Roberto was a civil engineer, working at a medium-sized construction company in Sao Paulo, and was about to be promoted to project manager. Marta, a psychology graduate, worked in a private practice and also provided services to an NGO that worked with vulnerable children. Married for 7 years, the couple had no children but planned to start a family soon. They lived in an apartment in the Perdizes neighborhood of Sao Paulo and kept it stable and organized. That morning, the couple were scheduled to board Trans-Brazil Flight 3417, scheduled to depart Eduardo Gomes International Airport at 11:45. The taxi that would take them to the airport was scheduled for 9:30. According to Marta's cousin, Carlos Eduardo, who walked them to the door, the couple seemed relaxed and happy, chatting animatedly about their plans for the rest of the year. They were normal, as always. Roberto mentioned a trip they were taking to Fortaleza at the end of the year, and Marta said she would call as soon as they arrived in Sao Paulo. Carlos reported in his initial statement to the police. The taxi arrived punctually and at 9:32, according to security cameras at the condominium where Dona Conceição lived. The vehicle took off with the couple. What was supposed to be a simple return trip turned into the beginning of one of the most intriguing and disturbing cases in recent Brazilian disappearance history. Roberto and Marta never arrived at the airport. The first few hours after their scheduled arrival time in Sao Paulo passed without any major concerns. Delays on domestic flights were common, and a lack of communication was initially attributed to signal problems or dead batteries on the couple's cell phones. However, when night fell and no contact had been made, the family began to worry. Helena, Roberto's sister, was the first to raise the alarm. After several failed attempts to contact her brother and sister-in-law, she called the airline and discovered that their names were missing from the flight's passenger manifest. 317, nor any other flight that day. The tickets had been purchased, but check-in was never completed. The following morning, July 28th, the disappearance was officially reported in both Sao Paulo and Manaus. Manaus police began searching immediately, starting with the route the taxi had supposedly taken. The taxi driver, Josemar Pinto, 42, was located that same day. In his statement, he stated that he had dropped the couple off at the airport around 10:15. They were calm, paid the fare in cash, and even gave me a good tip. I helped them get their bags out of the trunk, said goodbye, and left. Nothing unusual, Josemar stated. Airport security cameras, however, did not record the couple entering the terminal. A thorough scan of all available footage, covering all airport entrances between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m., showed no sign of Roberto and Marta. Temperatures in the city that day reached 30 degrees Celsius, with relative humidity above 90%. These conditions are typical of the Amazon, but can be extremely uncomfortable for those unfamiliar with the situation. Witnesses at the airport reported normal activity for a Saturday, with no notable incidents. The following days were marked by intense mobilization. Family members traveled from Sao Paulo to Manaus to closely monitor the search. Posters with the couple's photos were placed throughout the city. The local press gave extensive coverage to the case, which quickly gained national attention. Police searched hospitals, shelters, and even the Forensic Institute without success. Telephone companies confirmed that their cell phones had no further activity after 9:40 that morning, when they were likely still in the taxi. If you want to follow more cases like this, which shake up society as a whole and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation. The first week of the investigation focused on 3 main lines: a possible kidnapping, voluntary escape, or a crime committed during the journey to the airport. The taxi and the driver were thoroughly examined. The vehicle showed no signs of struggle or traces of blood. The taxi's GPS confirmed Josemar's stated route, with a stop of approximately 7 minutes at the airport. This was enough time to unload passengers and baggage. Josemar's background was investigated, but nothing suspicious was found. A driver for over 15 years, with no criminal record, married, and the father of 3 children. He was well known at the taxi rank in the Dona Conceição neighborhood. Other passengers who used his services before and after that trip confirmed his calm and professional nature. The second line of investigation, that of voluntary absconding, seemed equally unlikely. The couple had stable lives in Sao Paulo, well-paying jobs, good relationships with family and friends, and no apparent financial problems. There was no evidence that they were dissatisfied with their lives or that they were planning to disappear. Their bank accounts had not been emptied, and there had been no suspicious activity in the previous days or weeks. Investigators searched the couple's Sao Paulo apartment with the family's permission. They found everything in perfect order, as if they truly expected to return soon. There was food in the refrigerator, bills scheduled for automatic payment, and even a reminder in Marta's calendar for a doctor's appointment the following week. The third kidnapping hypothesis also presented inconsistencies. No ransom demand was made, and although the couple was financially comfortable, they were not exceptionally wealthy, making them obvious targets for this type of crime. Furthermore, kidnappings rarely involve adult couples. Criminals generally prefer single victims, who are more vulnerable and easier to control. After 2 weeks of intense searches without concrete results, the police expanded the scope of the investigation. Records of hotels, inns, and car rentals throughout the state of Amazonas were analyzed. The region's ports and small airports were also checked, as well as possible border crossings with neighboring countries, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela. The police chief in charge of the case, Ricardo Mendonça, stated at a press conference on August 15, 2002, "We are facing an extremely atypical case. It's as if the couple simply evaporated between the taxi and the airport. All hypotheses remain open, and we will continue investigating until we find answers." A clue emerged in late August when an employee at a car rental agency in Manaus reported seeing a couple similar to Roberto and Marta renting a car on July 27th. However, after checking the records, it was discovered that they were another couple from Sao Paulo visiting the city as tourists. In September, the family hired a private investigator, Ronaldo Martins, a former police officer with over 20 years of experience. Martins took a different approach, focusing on meticulously reconstructing the couple's stay in Manaus, day by day, hour by hour. He re-interviewed all family members who were with Roberto and Marta during their visit, employees of Dona Conceição's condominium, and anyone who had any kind of contact with them during those days. This meticulous work revealed a seemingly insignificant detail that had gone unnoticed. On the penultimate night of their stay, Roberto had gone out alone for approximately 2 hours, claiming to need to buy pain medication. It was something so commonplace that I didn't even think to mention it before. Dona Conceição told the detective. He left around 8 p.m. and returned around midnight with a pharmacy bag. He said he took the opportunity to walk around and get to know the neighborhood. Martins tracked down pharmacies in the area, but none of them specifically recalled Roberto. The security cameras at nearby pharmacies had already overwritten the recordings from that date. A possible lead had emerged, but without concrete evidence to develop it. Meanwhile, the Sao Paulo police conducted a parallel investigation, checking for possible enemies or threats related to the couple's work or personal lives. The construction company where Roberto worked was involved in a controversial bidding process for a large housing project, but there was no indication that he had any involvement in irregularities or was under threat. The first year after the disappearance passed without significant progress. The case remained open, but gradually lost ground in the media and on the police's priority list, which was facing a growing wave of urban crime in both Manaus and Sao Paulo. The families, however, did not give up. They created a website dedicated to the case, organized annual vigils on the date of the disappearance, and continued distributing pamphlets and granting interviews whenever possible. The Brazilian Association of Families and Friends of Missing Persons also embraced the cause, including photos of Roberto and Marta in its national campaigns. In 2004, an unexpected turn of events occurred when a fisherman found a backpack containing personal documents, including a credit card in Roberto Cardoso's name. on the banks of the Rio Negro, approximately 30 kilometers from Manaus. The backpack was partially deteriorated from prolonged exposure to the elements, but its contents remained recognizable. The discovery reignited the investigation. Search teams scoured the area where the backpack was found, using sniffer dogs and divers to check the riverbed. Nothing else was found. Subsequent analysis confirmed that the backpack did indeed belong to Roberto, but its presence in that remote location only deepened the mystery. The theory of an accident or foul play, followed by the concealment of the bodies in the river, gained momentum. But questions remained. How had the couple gotten to that point? Why had they strayed so far from their original destination? And why was only Roberto's backpack found, with no trace of Marta or any of their other luggage? The following years brought more false hopes than concrete answers. People resembling the couple were sighted throughout Brazil and even in neighboring countries, but none of these reports were confirmed. The police received numerous anonymous tips, many of them contradictory or clearly false, which only drained already scarce investigative resources. The case remained virtually stagnant until 2010, when a series of investigative reports on missing persons in Brazil, produced by a major national newspaper, brought the mystery of Roberto and Marta back to public attention. The report highlighted the inefficiency of search systems and the lack of integration between state police forces in handling disappearance cases. Under pressure from the renewed media attention, authorities in Manaus and Sao Paulo announced the formation of a task force. A joint task was to review unsolved disappearance cases. The Sao Paulo couple was among the first on the list. The team, led by Chief Inspector Antonio Barros, with extensive experience in complex crimes, began a thorough review of the case, re-examining every piece of evidence, testimony, and line of investigation. Using techniques and technologies unavailable in 2002, the team was able to extract additional information from the limited physical evidence preserved. A significant breakthrough occurred when they reanalyzed the GPS of Josemar Pinto's taxi. The 2002 technology showed only the main route, but the new systems were able to recover more detailed data, revealing that the taxi had made a brief, unreported stop of approximately 3 minutes on a side street about 2 kilometers before the airport. Josemar, located again and confronted with this information, initially denied any stop. After intense questioning, he admitted that the couple had asked to stop briefly so Roberto could buy water at a small grocery store. It was such a quick and mundane thing that I didn't even think to mention it. He got out, bought 2 bottles of water, got back in the car, and we continued on our way. Trip, he stated. The grocery store in question still existed, albeit under new ownership. There were no records or cameras from that time, but a longtime employee who had worked there since 2000 was located. Mauricio Ferreira, 57, had a surprisingly vivid memory of the day, not because of the couple themselves, but because of what happened afterward. I remember that day because that's when they found a body in the vacant lot behind the grocery store. The police were there all afternoon. I don't specifically remember a couple buying water in the morning. We served dozens of people every day, but I clearly remember confusion that followed. This new information was frightening. The team quickly consulted police records from July 2002 and, indeed, found a record of a body discovered near the grocery store on July 27th, around 2 p.m. It was an unidentified man, apparently homeless, with signs of a beating. The case was registered as a homicide, but never solved. The coincidence was too disturbing to ignore. Had the couple witnessed something related to this homicide during their brief stop? Had they seen something they shouldn't have and become targets of criminals? Or was it just a macabre coincidence? The investigation took a new turn, now focusing on the people involved in the unsolved homicide. The body found was never identified, but the autopsy at the time indicated the death had occurred between the 10th and 12th of that same day, potentially close to the time Roberto and Marta were in the area. In parallel, the investigative team thoroughly re-examined the site where Roberto's backpack had been found in 2004. Using modern mapping and soil analysis technologies, they discovered that the area was known by local fishermen as a body disposal point for criminal organizations operating in the region. Leave a comment and let us know if you believe that all missing people deserve to be found. In 2015, 13 years after the disappearance, a new lead emerged from an unexpected source. A former member of a criminal organization operating in northern Brazil, imprisoned for other crimes, offered information on several unsolved cases in exchange for benefits. Judicial proceedings. Gilberto Santana, known in the criminal world as Beto Sombra, claimed to have indirect knowledge of the disappearance of the Sao Paulo couple. According to him, Roberto and Marta were victims of a fatal mistake. What I heard was that they mistook the guy for a federal police officer who was undercover in the organization. The couple was in the wrong place at the wrong time. They caught them leaving the airport, thinking it was a police officer and his wife. Gilberto stated in an official statement. The information was vague, and Gilberto admitted not having participated directly in the crime, only hearing rumors years later. However, some details of his statement coincided with facts that had never been publicly disclosed, lending a certain credibility to his account. Delegate Barros decided to investigate this new line. Federal police records confirmed that there was indeed an infiltration operation underway against a criminal organization in Manaus at that time. The undercover agent, whose identity remains confidential for security reasons, had similar physical characteristics to Roberto: approximate height, physical build, hair color. This theory would explain why the couple never entered the airport, despite the taxi having dropped them off. They could have been approached in the parking lot or at one of the secondary entrances, not covered by security cameras. In 2002, the investigation gained new momentum with this revelation. The police began tracking down known members of the criminal organization that was operating at the time, many of whom were already dead or in prison for other crimes. Those who were located denied any involvement or knowledge of the case. In 2018, another significant development occurred when advanced DNA analysis, not available at the time of the disappearance, was performed on the backpack found in 2004. In addition to Roberto's genetic material, traces of at least 2 other unidentified individuals were found. These genetic profiles were compared with the criminal database, resulting in a partial match with a known criminal, Augusto Mendez, a Colombian national who had operated in the Amazon region between 2000 and 2005, when he was killed in a confrontation with the police during an operation against drug trafficking. The connection with Mendez strengthened the theory that the disappearance was linked to transnational organized crime operating in the region. Known for his brutality, Mendez was suspected of dozens of homicides related to drug trafficking and control of routes through the Amazon rainforest. In late 2020, an anonymous tip led investigators to an abandoned house in the Aleixo neighborhood, in the south-central area of Manaus. The informant, who never identified himself, claimed the property had been used as a safe house by a criminal organization in the early 2000s. The house, a 2-story building with a small attic, had been empty for at least a decade, according to neighbors. The current owner, who acquired the property in 2010 through a judicial purchase, never occupied or renovated due to financial problems. With a court order, the police carried out a thorough search of the property. Time in the Amazonian climate had caused serious damage to the structure. Mold covered much of the walls. The roof was leaking, and small animals had made the place their habitat. In the attic, accessible only by a retractable ladder in the second-floor hallway, investigators found a large closet built into the wall. The door was stuck due to years of humidity and lack of use, requiring the use of tools to force it open. What they found inside left even the most experienced police officers in a state of shock. 2 human skeletons side by side, in an advanced state of decomposition, but still with traces of tissue and some personal belongings preserved. A gold wedding ring with the initials RCNO and the date 151-0995 was found next to one of the skeletons. A deteriorated women's wallet contained fragments of a document with the partially legible name, Mar Oliveira. There was no more doubt. Roberto and Marta had finally been found 21 years after their disappearance. Preliminary forensic analysis indicated that both likely died from asphyxiation. Marks on their wrists and ankles suggested they had been tied up. The coroner estimated, based on the state of preservation and environmental conditions of the site, that the bodies could have been placed there shortly after the disappearance. In 2002, the attic closet, approximately 2 m wide by 1.5 m deep, had been modified to function as a hidden compartment. The back had been removed, creating access to a space between walls where the bodies were placed. The closet was later closed again, sealing the tragic secret for more than 2 decades. The discovery of Roberto and Marta's remains has finally allowed the reconstruction, with reasonable accuracy, of the events of that fateful day, July 27, 2002. According to the theory most accepted by investigators, based on physical evidence and testimonies collected over the years, the couple was indeed dropped off at the airport by taxi driver Josimar, as he always claimed. However, before entering the terminal, they were approached in the parking lot by individuals linked to the criminal organization led by Colombian Augusto Mendez, mistaken for an undercover federal agent and his wife. They were forced into a vehicle and taken to the house in the Aleixo neighborhood. There, realizing their mistake, the criminals face a dilemma: release them or risk reporting them, or eliminate them to ensure silence. Unfortunately, they opted for the second alternative. After the execution, the bodies were hidden in the secret compartment of the closet in Sodom, a place unlikely to be discovered in conventional police searches. Roberto's backpack, found on the banks of the Rio Negro in 2004, was likely discarded during the couple's transport home, or in a later attempt to dispose of evidence. Mendez's genetic material, found in the backpack, confirmed his direct involvement in the crime. As for the brief stop at the grocery store on the way to the airport, investigators concluded that its proximity to another crime that occurred on the same day was merely a coincidence. Nothing indicated a connection between the two incidents, other than the tragic coincidence of time and geography. In January 2023, the Amazonas Public Prosecutor's Office filed a formal complaint against 3 people linked to Mendez's organization, identified throughout the investigation as participants in the kidnapping and murder of the couple. 2 of them were already in prison for other crimes, while the third, who had been in custody since 2015, was located and arrested on the border with Colombia in a joint operation between the Brazilian and Colombian police. The Roberto and Marta case, as it became known in police records, was officially closed after 21 years, with the identification of the remains and the indictment of those responsible. However, for the families, the formal closure of the investigation brought a mixture of relief and renewed grief. On the one hand, we can finally give our loved ones a dignified burial and begin a true grieving process. On the other hand, reliving all the horror they must have gone through brings us unbearable suffering, said Roberto's sister, Helena, in a press conference following the official confirmation of the identification of the remains. The case generated important reflections on the procedures for searching for missing persons in Brazil. In 2024, the Roberto and Marta law was passed, establishing stricter and more integrated protocols for disappearance cases, including the creation of a unified national database and mandatory cooperation between state police forces. For the investigators who dedicated years of their careers to the case, the solution brought bittersweet professional satisfaction. No one celebrates an outcome like this, said Chief Inspector Antonio Barros, who led the task force in the final years of the investigation. But being able to give families back the truth and the possibility of closure is what drives us in this work. Roberto and Marta deserve to be remembered, and their story teaches us to never give up on the search for truth, no matter how long it takes. The impact of this case on Brazilian society transcended the police sphere. Documentaries, books, and even a television miniseries have been produced telling the story of the couple and the tireless search for answers that mobilized 2 generations of investigators. If you've watched this far, it's because you care about these cases that mark families forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched this far so I can get to know you and know who really cares about pursuit of truth." Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video so more people can learn about this story and reflect on the importance of never giving up hope when it comes to finding missing people, no matter how much time has passed.